I used to think marriage was the final destination. Once you signed those papers, wore that white dress, it meant you had everything figured out. No more searching, no more restless nights wondering who you'd share your life with. I learned the hard way it's not that simple. This is my confession. My name is Lara, and I'm 22 years old. I got married to Alex less than a year ago. It was one of those swift romances that everyone around me called a fairy tale. He was my teaching assistant in a college seminar I loved, and I was the undergrad who found his intelligence magnetic. He was a few years older, more experienced, someone I believed could guide me through adult life without stumbling. We connected fast, so sure we'd found our perfect match that we hardly questioned the rush toward the altar. My parents were hesitant, but supportive. They saw how enamored I was, how Alex seemed calm and steady in a way that balanced my youthful impulses. We moved into a small apartment near the same university campus. Alex had a stable job tutoring and assisting professors, and I took an office assistant role at a local firm, telling myself it was a stepping stone before I found a true career path. The first weeks of marriage were sweet. Late-night movies in bed, grocery shopping like it was an adventure, calling each other husband and wife with giddy excitement, but routine settled in faster than I'd anticipated. Alex was busy finishing a major research project, often bringing stacks of papers home. I wanted to talk about exploring the city, maybe traveling or going to concerts, but he seemed content to stay in. Our evenings turned into me scrolling social media while he typed on his laptop, side by side, yet somehow miles apart. I told myself this lull was normal, that newlyweds adjust in phases. But a nagging sense of restlessness grew inside me. I realized that at 22, I'd locked in a life path, and a small voice kept asking if I'd truly lived enough before making that commitment. I adored Alex. He was kind, thoughtful, rarely raised his voice, but the passion I expected from marriage seemed to wane quickly. We never fought, yet we rarely shared anything deeply personal anymore. Sometimes, in bed, I'd roll over and think, is this it? Around this time, my friend Isabel mentioned a volunteer spot at an art and culture center downtown, a place that offered workshops and exhibits. She said they needed extra help setting up for a photography showcase, a global exhibit featuring pictures from travelers and professionals who captured unique stories behind each shot. I'd always loved creative spaces, so I jumped at the chance, figuring it might bring me some excitement. It was an unpaid gig, just a few hours a week, but I had free evenings, and Alex was buried in academic work. He barely glanced up from his laptop when I told him I'd volunteer. "That's cool," he said, eyes on the screen. So I started heading to the center after my day job, meeting other volunteers, discussing how to arrange photos, drafting schedules for the opening night. That's where I met Dominic. He was the curator for one of the exhibit rooms, tasked with choosing which photos to display, how to frame them, and writing brief captions summarizing each piece's emotional pull. Dominic was in his early 40s, nearly double my age. I might have noticed that fact fleetingly if it hadn't been overshadowed by his easy confidence. There was something about the way he explained the significance of each photo, how he'd talk about composition and lighting, but also about the deeper story behind a single captured moment. He treated me, the newbie volunteer, with a respectful curiosity, asking about my opinions and hearing them out as if they held weight. At first, I chalked my admiration up to being starstruck by his knowledge. He'd say something like, "Look at how the photographer caught the reflection in that puddle. Makes you wonder what the subject was thinking." And it was as if a new world opened. I'd never realized how a simple image could convey entire lives, entire feelings we rarely articulate. He made it feel like an adventure, dissecting frames and describing the places these pictures were taken. I found myself lingering after each volunteer session, wanting to hear more about his travels, the stories he'd collected from photographers worldwide. He'd reciprocate by asking about me, where I'd gone to college, what I liked to do in my free time. I was embarrassed to admit I hadn't traveled much, that I was married so young. But he never judged, only listened. That genuine interest from him felt like water on parched soil. One night we stayed late at the center, just the two of us finishing the layout for the main exhibit hall. We moved pictures around on tall stands, adjusting angles under the track lighting. Our conversation meandered from photography to personal dreams. He asked me if I'd ever planned to explore the world, and I confessed that I used to dream of backpacking across Europe, but life took a different turn once I got serious with Alex. A little sadness leaked into my voice. Dominic paused, looking at me with concern, as if seeing behind my casual shrug. In that quiet hallway, with the overhead lights buzzing softly, I felt my heart clench. There was a connection forming, one that reached far beyond photography. Nothing physical happened that night, but the tension was palpable, a current we both sensed. I drove home guilty, as though I'd betrayed Alex by feeling anything but routine contentment. Yet at the same time, my heart fluttered. Over the next few days, Dominic and I started texting about random exhibit updates, and those chats slowly morphed into more personal musings, recommendations for movies, music that inspired him, occasional jokes about the day's craziness. Alex, busy as ever, barely noticed me on my phone, or if he did, he assumed it was Isabel or the volunteer group. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to question me, to see if he still cared enough to get jealous, or if I just wanted him to remain oblivious so I could explore this newfound closeness. Then came the day we finalized the exhibit layout. A few volunteers were absent, so it was Dominic, me, and a couple of staff members. We ended early thanks to a surprisingly smooth arrangement. One by one, the others left, with Dominic and me lingering to do a final walkthrough. He told me how each photo fit into the broader narrative of human stories abroad. I felt goosebumps at his descriptions, how even the simplest snapshot had layers. I found myself sharing how, at 22, I sometimes felt I'd signed away my sense of exploration, like I'd anchored myself to a life plan before tasting the possibilities out there. He listened intently, occasionally nodding, but not rushing to reassure me everything would be fine. Instead, he let me speak. It felt more intimate than any conversation I'd had in ages, including those with Alex. As we headed out, the center's main lights clicked off behind us, leaving us in the glow of the exit sign. At the door, we paused, an odd hush settling. His eyes flicked to my hands, then to my face, as though asking a question I wasn't ready to answer. I fumbled for my keys, said a quick, "See you," and practically ran to my car, but my heart pounded all the way home. Alex was in bed reading articles on his tablet. He smiled, asked if the exhibit was ready. I forced a casual nod, fighting the wave of guilt that threatened to surface. I couldn't bring myself to mention Dominic or how alive I'd felt. Days turned into a pattern. I'd go to my day job, handle mundane tasks, then eagerly wait for the volunteer shifts or the next group message about the exhibit. Dominic would post a photo in our volunteer chat, but then send me a separate message, something playful or reflective. I'd respond, each exchange hinting at a deeper closeness. On one hand, I told myself it was just a friendship. On the other, I couldn't ignore that spark whenever I saw his name light up my screen. Eventually, the exhibit's opening night arrived. A big crowd showed up, milling around with wine glasses, admiring the photos. Dominic, wearing a sharp blazer, introduced me to some visiting photographers, praising my help as if I'd been pivotal. I blushed, overwhelmed by the attention. Alex was supposed to come, but last minute he texted me that he had an urgent meeting with a professor, some crisis in the research department. I said I understood, but deep down, I felt both relieved and disappointed. Relieved because I sensed something in the air between Dominic and me was intensifying. Disappointed because this was supposed to be a milestone in my life, and my husband was absent. At the end of the evening, after the guests trickled out, we volunteers toasted with leftover sparkling cider. Dominic pulled me aside, saying he wanted to properly thank me. We ended up stepping outside to the center's courtyard, where soft lights hung in the trees. The hum of traffic in the distance mixed with the chirps of nighttime insects. He asked how I felt about everything, my first big exhibit, my experiences. I hesitated, then confided that it was more meaningful than I expected, that it made me question the life I was living. He gently brushed a strand of hair from my face, an intimate gesture that froze me in place. My pulse hammered. We stood there, mere inches apart, tension radiating. I couldn't deny it anymore. We both knew we were crossing a line. We shared a tentative kiss, light, testing, a rush of emotions blazing through me. I gasped, pulling back, tears pricking my eyes as guilt roared up. I whispered that I was married, that I shouldn't be doing this. Dominic's face clouded with regret, but also with yearning. He apologized, insisted he never wanted to cause problems, but admitted he couldn't ignore our bond. My mind spun in circles. I found myself nodding, tears rolling down my cheeks. We parted with no promises, just the weight of what we'd done. I drove home in a haze, entering a dark apartment. Alex was asleep, a post-it note on the table saying he'd had to leave early for campus the next morning. The reality of what I'd done slammed into me like a tidal wave. I was 22, barely into adulthood, and already betraying the man I vowed to stay with forever. But a stubborn part of me refused to label it pure mistake. That spark was real. It was a sign that maybe I wasn't as fulfilled as I claimed. My heart wrestled with shame and a strange sense of freedom. In the following days, Dominic and I struggled to stay away from each other. We tried limiting communication to group emails about volunteer wrap-ups, but it didn't hold. He texted me a sincere apology, asking if I wanted to talk. I caved, meeting him at a quiet cafe in a corner of town we hoped no one else would recognize. Over coffee, we confessed that we couldn't easily cut off what had ignited. The conversation turned into a discussion about age differences, me at 22, him at 40-something, and how it created different life stages. Yet neither of us could dismiss the connection as fleeting. By the end of that cafe visit, we kissed again, more certain now, tears in my eyes as I realized I was diving deeper into an affair I never intended. I started lying to Alex more often. I'd claim an urgent volunteer meeting, or that Isabel needed me late at the center. Each lie ate away at me, but the moments with Dominic felt like air after being underwater. We'd drive out to the lake's edge, park the car, talk for hours about life's regrets and hopes, then share desperate embraces that left me dizzy. Dominic told me he admired my courage in some ways, stepping out of my comfort zone, but also worried I might realize I'd made a mistake too late. I told him my mistake might have been burying my real self in a marriage I rushed into. The complexity weighed on us both. Meanwhile, Alex grew suspicious. He noticed the tension in my voice, the flicker of panic when he reached for my phone. One evening, he directly asked if something was wrong. I denied it, heart pounding. He said my eyes had been red lately, as if I'd been crying. I brushed him off. The following weekend, I came home from another rendezvous with Dominic to find Alex waiting by the door, arms folded, heartbreak in his gaze. He'd checked some messages on my laptop that I'd accidentally left open. Enough clues pointed to a man named Dominic, enough to reveal I was seeing someone else. He demanded an explanation, voice trembling. I stammered half-truths, insisting it wasn't what he thought, that I was confused. He asked, tears streaming, if I loved Dominic. I couldn't answer. He stormed out, leaving me shaking. I called Dominic in tears, explaining that Alex knew. Dominic said he'd stand by whatever I decided. If I wanted to try to fix my marriage, he'd back off. If I needed him, he wouldn't run away. My mind reeled. Did I want to fix something that felt broken from the start? Or did I want to leap into an uncertain future with a man double my age? The question knotted my stomach. I realized how inexperienced I truly was in life's bigger decisions. I jumped into marriage at 21, and now I was jumping into an affair at 22. Could I trust my own judgment? As of now, Alex moved in with a friend, leaving me alone in our apartment. My ring still sits on my finger, a grim reminder of the vows I spoke not long ago. I ache with guilt, recalling the bright optimism of our wedding day. Dominic tries to comfort me, but we both know the weight of the situation. Our stolen kisses no longer carry pure excitement. They're laced with sorrow for the pain we've caused. I sometimes wonder if I should be alone for a while, learning who I am outside a marriage, outside an affair. But each time, the fear of loneliness grips me, and Dominic's presence beckons with that sense of understanding I've craved. I'm sharing this story not for sympathy, but as a cautionary tale of how illusions can crumble. Marrying young didn't guarantee the bliss I assumed. Ignoring cracks in my life led me to a deeper betrayal than I ever thought I was capable of. At 22, I'm left at a crossroads, uncertain if I can salvage what I had with Alex, if I even want to, or if I'll risk forging a life with Dominic. Or maybe I'll walk away from both, discovering the self I bypassed by rushing from college student to wife in the blink of an eye. If anyone reading this wonders if youth and marriage are an easy mix, let my confession remind you that true understanding, both of yourself and your partner, is crucial. If I had faced my doubts openly with Alex, maybe we could have found a healthier path. Instead, my silence led me to Dominic, to an affair that shattered the fragile world I built. Now I confront the aftermath with no clear sense of direction. But at least the illusions are gone. I see the cost of longing, the destructiveness of ignoring your heart's whispers, and the painful truth that being grown up on paper doesn't mean you're ready to navigate the storms of adult life.